Okay, we're the 2nd of December, and here where I find myself, it's 8:15 p.m. and I intend to make what one could call a lecture on the philosophy of spirit for about between 1 hour and 1 hour and 30 minutes. I do not consciously plan what I'm about to say. I will try to improvise. It's some sort of an exercise, a training for myself. I will try to share the view of what a society is in as simple a way as possible without compromising on at least a little bit of intellectual rigor. And I've decided to start my videos with the idea that I don't know who will watch the video, when, what do they know, what is their level of intelligence, their level of consciousness, what do they know, what are they aware of, etc. So I've decided as long as I publish videos in a specific current context, I will try to show as much information as possible to just situate the context of what I'm talking about. So here this drawing represents the movement of spirit, which is the consciousness of individuals in the particular context of the Western world, the modern Western world in the 2010s and 2020s, and especially in the United States of America. These are the main division, the opposition which structure the intellectual, political and spiritual life of the US in the modern world, but most Western countries. People, they are on one side or the other of the dichotomy, usually, and the tendency, here we have social media and critique of banking. We do not see well because of the projector. These are the fundamental categories which structure the life, and most people, they have a view, they are on one side or the other to various degrees. They can be more or less radical, sometimes extreme in one way or another, but this is what structures the process of consciousness. The books which are being published, the news in the media, the debates which occur, the conversation, the political affiliations, etc., etc., and the fundamental movement of spirit, which here means the consciousness, is a shift towards the right, namely a restoration of balance towards the intellectual views, the values, which are here mostly on the right. That's just in 3 minutes, the simple presentation. I have commented this more thoroughly in other videos. I will put the link when I publish this video. But now I will talk about what I call spirit. This I call the phenomenology of spirit, phenomenal appearance of spirit. Invisible substance which is being made manifest and present through all individuals, depending on their level of awareness, their level of consciousness, etc., etc. And now I will comment, I will spend, I don't know, maybe an hour commenting my view of what a society is. I just have to. So here I show the broad picture of what I envision to be a society with the fundamental categories. It's very simplified, but it enables to see a total, not a totalitarian, but a full view of what a society is. And I briefly comment, and then briefly comment the full view, and then I will go into more detail. At the fundamental level, the basic level, we have the sociobiological determinations from sociobiology to psychology and intelligence. So these are the people, the population, which constitute a society, and here, up higher, we have the social organization of the people, which organize itself in various institutions, which are modes of organizing and structuring a social and a collective life, collectively, yeah. So this is the full view. I will not comment now, but I will begin by commenting the demographic aspect of a society. Yeah. And at the highest level, art, religion, and philosophy are free modes of expressing the truth about any given society and the truth about the human condition and eventually the truth about the divine, about God. Yeah. So I will let the camera so that we can see. Yeah, I will comment briefly what I call subjektiver Geist. We see. I have to improve the editing skills, but as of now I focus on the intellectual content. Yeah, I will comment these categories very simply. I have not prepared this, it took me 5 minutes of preparation, so I cannot improvise, but I will try to be not too rigorous, but to be fluent, not in the vocabulary expression, but in the expression of ideas. So, first, I will use this as well. UPS. All things are made in the image of the concept, and the concept is another word for God. That's the philosophical terminology for God. It has 3 moments: universality, particularity, and singularity. All objects are singular, individual, concrete, fully determined objects which contain particular characteristics, determinations, or properties, and a universal genus, a universal determination, one might say. In religious language, that's why it is said in the Bible that humans are made in the image of God, because God would be the universal, which particularizes itself, and then singularizes itself, and every singular human being is a fully determined individual with particularities, and a universal aspect, which is made manifest through language which expresses thought, and humans can all agree on universal determination, that which we call science, although they differ singularly and in their particularities, because they are opposed, they are different, they are distinct, and only on the universal level, through agreement, through science, can they agree with one another. And here I will make a personal remark. I understand that what people expect is to find someone that they can relate to. But here I will illustrate what to relate to means. Singular humans, they are opposed to one another singularly. Every singular human is alone and opposed, not necessarily in a negative way, although it can be negative, that's the realm of selfishness, one might say, opposed to all the others, but he can connect to others through his particularities, mostly people of the same generation, the same ethnic group, the same gender, the same economic activity, the same sociological status, high bourgeoisie, lower class, middle class, etc., the same country of origin, the same culture, the same religion, etc. People unite, gather together, either physically or intellectually or emotionally through their particularities, and then they are opposed to others, men against women, the various ethnic oppositions, the opposition between the various countries, etc., etc. But on a universal level, potentially they can all agree, but in order for agreement to occur on a universal level, there has to be the expression of ideas, and the best ideas eventually emerge, and they put everyone in accordance, if there is honesty, intellectual honesty, because the universal is that which is valid for all the particularities and all the singulars which are contained under the universal. So here I will talk about, one might say, the universal view of what a society is. It's predominantly a modern society in the sense of rights, property rights, contracts, a developed and fully determined judicial political system. It only occurs in developed societies, predominantly in the modern world, but it already existed in antiquity, but it's not valid for all human societies that have ever existed and then still do exist. For instance, in the very primitive societies of the Amazonian forest, or the native tribes of Northern America or Australia before European colonialism, there were no property rights as such. There was no constitution. There was no written impersonal set of legislation. These were more tribal relationships. There were, of course, standards of ethics and behavior and codes of conduct and institutions in this sense, but they were not impersonal because people lived in tribal communities predominantly, and they all knew one another. In more developed societies with more affluent economically and more numerous demographically, the relationship becomes impersonal, which requires impersonal interactions and rules of interaction, that which we call law and legislation. Yeah, that's just an example. There were no social media among the native tribes of Australia before the Anglo-Saxon arrived there. Thank God there were no social media, one might say. That's a joke, that's a joke. Yeah, so I will talk for about an hour about my view of a society that's a universal presentation. Namely, it's valid not for all societies, like I've just mentioned. Namely, the most primitive societies, they do not have secret services, telephones, a complex banking system, but all the other determination, most of the other, they are found within all societies, or at least all modern developed societies. So, I will try to... First, I will promote some of the books that I used to promote. Bullshit Jobs. They're the same in the French translation. It has been translated in many countries because there are bullshit jobs in many countries in the modern world. Water survival guide, how to make supplies of water. The pantry primer, how to make supplies of food. That's what I call American common sense. This is prepping, translated in French by a Swiss author. Where are my books about the educational system? Well, that's a proof that my preparation for this video hasn't been thorough and very well developed, but I know where my books are because I cleaned my room. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Very useful, your piece of advice. Yeah. The problem with the welfare state, in the singular case of modern American society, but actually it's a universal problem. Dumbing us down, Real Education by Charles Murray, again that's what I call American common sense, and the school revolution. The educational system will soon become obsolete because of the circulation of information on the internet, and my contribution, a universal contribution to the abolition of the educational system at some moment, is that I provide the view of the totality to structure the view of what a society is. Just for it can have many use for many people, but from strictly educational purposes, to have a full view of what a society is can help clarify the structure of the lectures given in junior high school level, high school level, college level, just to have a full view. Or simply, one of the reasons why I'm interested in the view of the totality, as I call it here, is just the social totality. It doesn't include nature and logic. But for instance, the media, it's very frustrating to read the news because there are bits of information, pieces of information coming from everywhere, from all over the world, and there is no context. Of course, because the singular journalists, they do not have the time or sometimes not the competence to contextualize everything they say. It takes a lot of time. Only in more developed books it's possible to do this, but in a short article one cannot contextualize everything. But if we are constantly confronted by pieces of information coming from everywhere, it's very easy to manipulate people, consciously or unconsciously, and second, it's unintelligible because of the sheer excess of information. That's why it's important sometimes to work on the structure, what I could call the conceptual architecture. That's what I've been doing, just to be able to situate any single piece of information, to recontextualize within the global picture, the broader view. Yeah. Other books that I've been reading that I promote: Spontaneous Order, The Capitalist Case for a Stateless Society, The Problems with Socialism by Di Lorenzo, again American Common Sense, a very good book, and The Fed by Ron Paul. I've made donations to the Ron Paul Institute, and I will keep doing this as long as I can. Yeah. So now let us begin with the commentary. I improvise, but I try to make intelligible, so I improvise the commentary, but I will try to make this document, which is my document. This is my sweat and tears, as Marshall Mathers says in Don't Push Me. Oh yeah, and also I forgot the formal presentation. I improve intellectually every waking hour because I interpret and reinterpret every new experience that I have, so my content, it does not necessarily keeps getting better every waking hour and every day, but usually, that's now, I have decided now to give the date of the recording of all my videos, just so that when people watch this, they can compare eventually, if they watch several of my videos, with the previous content that I have produced, with the chronological moment at which it was recorded, and say, okay, he has gathered new data since. It doesn't mean that my videos get better, although I think partly they do. Not always, but that's the broad tendency, yeah. Because, yeah, so I do not, I regret having said a lot of things, but as long as I can improve, as long as I can act, I will try to improve myself, and here giving a chronological perspective of my intellectual development helps me clarify for myself and for others, namely that, I don't know, of course it's the most recent video that I've been recording because I am currently recording this video, but by the time that you watch the video, maybe I will have produced other videos, or many other videos, or not, I don't know, but I will have improved. And also, what I've understood is that through the medium of the internet, knowledge becomes public. There's a growing world consciousness, which is not conscious of itself, but that's what in ordinary terminology is called the global village, that potentially any person from anywhere can communicate to all the others, but then it requires, to say something interesting, the proper language, because potentially ideas are universal and they are not dependent on the language. Here, that would be the ideas which are thought determinations are universal and they are being expressed in the particular languages. The dominant language in the modern world, not necessarily in terms of sheer numbers, but in terms of importance, namely the language in which most of the most recent ideas are being expressed is the English language. Because the Anglo-Saxons conquered the world. Yeah. Make mankind speak German again. That's a private joke. Maybe we'll see that later, but as of now, let us talk English. What was I saying? So ideas, when they are shared on the internet, they become public and anyone can appropriate the idea and use any kind of idea, good or bad, to improve his or her worldview. Say, okay, that's really a bad idea. Oh, that's really a good idea. I will borrow this idea. And maybe I can add individual personal ideas, but ideas precisely, they are good, they are not personal, they are universal. But what I've tried to share, that's one of my purposes, is to show the view of the totality, because I think it's really helpful. So here I'm in a good mood, in a stable mood. It's not always the case, I can have very negative tendencies, but this is part of my contribution, so I will use this document as long as I can, or as long as I do not improve the document, but as long as it's really simplified, but it's really helpful, so I will comment the document. To illustrate, it will not be a thorough, very detailed commentary, but to illustrate the usefulness of this formal presentation of the social totality. So, yeah, I improvise the comments, but I have to be able eventually to talk and to understand the world with or without this formal presentation. It's just a helping device. So, let us begin. The fundamental basic of any human society is the population. If there is no population, it's difficult to have a running and functioning society. It's better to have a population if you want to steal the money from the people to finance whatever political scheming. So the population of any society is first and foremost determined sociobiologically, which means, already here it's already controversial within the context of the modern world, because here I illustrate, in the modern Western world, it is thought and said that the behavior of humans is completely autonomous from any biological determination. So all these aspects, sociobiology, physiognomy, evolutionary psychology, they are completely disconnected. Sometimes they do not even enter the debate in a lot of Western countries, or in remote academic circles, or social media groups, one might say, but it is widely believed in the modern Western world, and there are historical reasons which justify this, or justify or explain this, namely that it is believed overwhelmingly that the values, which would be the behavior, it's connected to what is being shared and promoted by the family and the educational system and the media. So the educational system, the family and the media, they contribute, and also the political life, they contribute to shaping the notions of right and wrong, good and evil, and the ethical behavior and the sense of responsibility of humans. And one of the fundamental determination of our modern world in the West is that it is believed that behavior is completely disconnected from any sort of biological determination, because there is many reasons to explain it, because if it was shown that there was a connection, it would lead to prejudice, bias, bigotry, racism, misogyny, etc., etc. But actually, the development of science, so that's the ideology which has been inherited since the 1960s, and in itself it's connected to the trauma of the abuses of biological science wrongly used by National Socialist Germany, Imperial Japan, and Fascist Italy, the losers of the Second World War. So one of the fundamental epistemological trend of the modern world, which in the theory of knowledge, is that behavior is disconnected from biology. But actually science, mostly in the United States, has kept evolving and improving, and it has been shown by more and more research that actually no, the behavior of human is partly, some might say predominantly, determined by biology. A book like this by Mr. Edward O. Wilson, which was first published officially in 1975, is a breakthrough. It's an important book, namely because it tried to show that the behavior of humans, men and women interaction, economic interaction, that's not what the book talks about, but that's the consequence. That to talk about sociobiology means to imply that the behavior between men and women, economic relationships, legislative relationship, criminal actions, of course, military and diplomatic interactions, which are just the projection on an international level of internal political determination. So they are the byproduct of sociobiological determination, namely that humans are determined by their biology, tendency towards aggression against other males, for males, competition for status, competition for climbing up the social hierarchy, the fear of being excluded, attraction for members of the other sex, tendency towards reproduction, the number of offspring, the mating strategies, etc. These are just fundamental determination, but human beings are partly sociobiologically determined, namely their biology, their body influences a lot of their behavior. There can be a lot of self-control, and humans can extract themselves from the tendencies of the natural world. Very simple example are homosexuality, which apparently from a sociobiological perspective, in which the purpose is to reproduce one's own genes, homosexuality seems unnatural in the sense that it's not widely extended in the natural world. But there are homosexuals in the human world. It's partly cultural, it's partly sociobiological. I'm not an expert on this topic, but yeah, this is an example. Another example is suicide. Suicide doesn't make a lot of evolutionary sense, namely the species or the individuals who kill themselves in the natural world. I'm not sure that there are many. They do not reproduce and they do not have a lot of success. So suicide is partly a social behavior. So there are exceptions to the rule, but what is becoming manifest through the development of the sharing of information on the internet is that humans indeed, in order to understand human beings in the modern world, but retrospectively by looking back at the historical process, it's important to take into account the impulses of the biological aspect of humans, not just the moral. Moral here doesn't mean good or bad, but moral as opposed to physical, namely the ability that humans have of thinking of themselves as purely free agents, namely not bound to any ties of the lower tendencies in the classical religious or ethical doctrine, namely to act as purely free agent independently of any determinism, mostly natural determinism in terms of instinct, selfishness, desire, sexual desire, etc. That's the classical ethical and sometimes religious view. But the modern world contradicts this by empirical data and explanation, namely to explain that humans are determined by their biology to act the way they do. Usually males, they go after females, they chase the most attractive female partner of the group to reproduce, etc. The females, they are attracted by high status males, etc. So men and women relationship can be explained, a lot is explained through the sociobiological lens. Other example of books more accessible and more focused on anthropology, because this book talks about social animals, so it partly talks about human, but these kind of books, again produced in the Anglo-Saxon world, they focus more on the anthropological aspect. Yeah. Another book, very moderate, by Charles Murray, that's modern American science, vulgarization in the good sense, which make accessible for a relatively intelligent audience the latest discovery in the realm of anthropology concerning ethnic and sexual differences, namely that the behavior of humans is partly determined by the sexual difference, which is biological, and the ethnic differences, which are biological as well, and it explains parts of the behavior of humans in the realm of economics, sociology, ethics, rights, culture, marriage, etc., etc. These are illustrations. So, to simplify, in order to understand, also there's the demographic aspect, a society, the foundation of a society, the building, not the building blocks, but the fundamental determination of society is its people, and a people is demographically determined, namely in terms of number, how many people are there in a country, or on the planet as a whole. What is the age of the population? How is the age being distributed? Are there more old people, more young people, more people between 25 and 45? What is the category in terms of age which is the most numerous? There are demographic trends in terms of reproduction. What is the birth rate? What is the death rate? What is the cause of a high birth rate? Is it lack of protection, lack of condoms, etc.? Is it hope in the future? Is it religious inclination? Is it whatever the reason, be they psychological, economic, cultural, etc.? What is the cause of a high death rate? Is it disease, famine, lack of hygiene, etc., etc.? So the demography is a fundamental determination which helps understand the life of modern society, but also of all past societies, and to make predictions about future societies. And demography, it's not just abstract, these are not just abstract humans which compose a demographic group, but they are particularly determined in terms of age, intelligence, ethnicity, and sexual difference. There are demographic tendencies. And one of the sentences which is being repeated sometimes on the internet is demography is destiny, which means that the demographic determination of a country shape its future, in the sense that if a country has a lot of birth rate, it will expand, it will probably thrive, depending on the level of intelligence, the level of economic opportunity, etc. of the population, but it is a hopeful prospect for the future. On the contrary, a country which does not produce children any longer, like Japan or Germany or most Western country concerning the native historical population, namely European people, white people, whether it's in Europe or in the Northern American continent, if the birth rate are very low, it means that the economic prospects for the future are kind of gloomy. The population will grow older, so it brings about question of how to to take care of the old, is it through investment in a technology like robots, like in Japan, or is it by replacing the people with people from a different continent, like the immigration policy of most Western countries? There has to be borrowing and debt to borrow for the health insurance and the health taking care of the health of an aging population, which requires more medicine, more chemical drugs, medical drugs, and more doctors, etc., etc. These are the kind of questions that looking at a society through the lens of demography can help understand. In a historical perspective, the rise and the thriving of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire before the Christian era could be explained by the demography. And in the early centuries of the Roman Empire, by the demography of the Italian peninsula. There was then a Black Death in Europe in the 14th century, which caused the decline of the population, and then with the Industrial Revolution there was a tremendous outburst of population in Europe at first, but then in the world at large. The population has been multiplied by a factor of 7 or 8 over the course of the past couple of centuries. It explains a lot of economic, technological, cultural phenomena, etc. So in order to understand any society, to understand the demographic is important, and the ethnic and sexual, usually the sexes, they are balanced, but to understand the ethnic composition of the demographic of a country, and to understand the sexual, anthropological, and sociobiological determination of all humans in order to understand their behavior. So that would be the population of any society on a collective scale, the fundamental determination which help understand the population. Yeah. Okay. I continue. Other books by moderate Anglo-Saxon scientists, though Mr. Tatuvalainen was Finnish. Ethnic conflicts, it started with sociobiology and ethnic differences, namely there have been studies being published which show that the biological roots of ethnic nepotism, people usually they are biologically determined to favor their own in-group, namely the people who share the same genes, on a closer level or on a wider level, the people who look like them, because it's in their unconscious interest from a reproductive strategy. People are ethnically and they are biologically determined to favor usually their own ethnic group, which explains a lot of ethnic tensions historically or in modern societies, the problems in multicultural societies. A book like this, it produces universal knowledge because it talks about all societies, or most of them, and in most societies where there are multi-ethnic populations, there are tensions because people, they are spontaneously determined to favor the people who look like them and then to reject, more or less violently, people who are different. There can be transcendence through ethics, morality, behavior, etc., etc., and universal rights, but the basic determination is biological, and people have a spontaneous tendencies to prefer people who look like them genetically. It brings about problems, and not identifying the problems makes it very difficult to solve the problems. Yeah. Another book, the Evolutionary Psychology. Evolutionary Psychology is sociobiological determination in the realm of the individual psyche. The evolutionary psychology behind politics. It explains basically that the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats, or the Conservatives and the Liberals, they are partly sociobiologically determined. Yeah, by Mr. Anonymous Conservative. Yeah. And another example of demographic tendencies, a book by Mr. Edward Dutton, At Our Wits' End, Why We're Becoming Less Intelligent and What It Means for the Future. So the demography of any society is also determined by the level of intelligence of the population, and if the most intelligent reproduce less and the less intelligent reproduce more on the longer term, there will probably be a decline of intelligence, which brings about problems in terms of economics, sociology, culture, etc., etc. Yeah. will just drink a glass of water. Yeah, so that was for the broad collective determination, biological determination of a society. Now, on a more individual level, each singular individual is determined physiognomically and in terms of personality and talent. Here, really, these are the simplest determination, but each singular human has a specific physiognomy, namely the structure of the face, but also the whole body. And in order to understand oneself and to understand others and to understand human interactions, one has to take into account one's own physiognomy and the physiognomy of others. I will simplify to the utmost. Beautiful people, usually it's easier for them economically if they are women. Very privileged, these beautiful women. They don't have to work, they just have to seduce a hard-working man and they will have a good life. That's a joke, I know. Beautiful women, they suffer usually because people do not take them seriously, because they are just attracted by their beauty and they miss the importance of the personality. Yeah, it could be worse than being a beautiful woman, but there are beautiful women who suffer. And of course, ugly people, they suffer as well. It's more difficult for a woman than for a male, for sociobiological reasons, because women, they tend to prefer and to favor behavior in men and not just the physical appearance. So it's easier to be an ugly man than an ugly woman. It's not easy, but it's easier. Yeah, but it determines. It's not just beauty and ugliness. It's also the character. Also, in a book like this, Evolutionary Psychology, very good book, Mr. David Booth, very good. Women, they tend to prefer unconsciously men with a masculine face, with masculine features in terms of jaw, the eyes, etc. And men, of course, usually they tend to prefer feminine women in terms of the features of the face. But then, of course, the physiognomy can also be bodily problems or bodily specificities. I don't know. I don't think about anything in particular, but that's a joke. Yeah, I will not draw a picture, but I think intelligent people, or not so intelligent, they can understand that people can, their life can be determined for good or for bad, depending on some physiognomical, in the broadest sense, not just the face, but the whole body, characteristic. Yeah. Yeah, I will not go into too much detail, but yeah. Then every singular person is determined in terms of personality, namely, here that's the transition already towards psychology, but every singular human has his or her own personality, namely a way to behave, to interact with others, a way of being spontaneous, or being, I will not make the categories of psychology. Mr. Peterson does this very well. Mr. Peterson, I promote your videos. Yeah, so every singular human, in order to understand oneself and to understand others, one has to understand the personality of others. There are toxic people, there are pleasant people, attractive people in terms of personality, positive people, negative people, people with a high social intelligence, rigid people, psychotic people. That would be a transition towards psychological, psychiatric problem. But yeah, every singular human is unique in a sense that he has his or her own personality. The fundamental determination, they are universal and particular, but each singular human has his or her own personality, and it can shape the demographic trend in a sense that some people, they mate based on personality trait. As Nietzsche said somewhere, if you marry a woman, make sure that she's not boring, you can talk to her, because most of the time spent in marriage, there will be no sex, or sex will not be very exciting, because the woman will get old very quickly. Once she's past 30, that's a joke! But Nietzsche was serious. He said basically, when choosing a marriage partner, choose an interesting woman so that you can have interesting conversation in old age when beauty will have faded away. Very intelligent, this German philosopher. Yeah. Talent. Every human has a talent. Some have more talents and more intensely developed, etc. But all humans, they are good at something. Most of them. And the talent of people, it can be exploited in the good sense, not exploitation of the worker, but it can be used adequately in a well-developed economic system with a good educational system. Did I promote the book? Yeah. Good. Here, it's a... Thank you, Charles Murray. Very useful, your books. A good educational system ought to be able to spot, to identify the talents and to exploit them in the good sense, to make them thrive, to develop them, to not necessarily to bring about economic prosperity, but to bring about virtue. That's what Mr. Charles Murray talks about, but also to work for the benefit of society. A good educational system, the purpose ought to be to identify the talents and to make them thrive. Yeah, that's an example. So there's a connection between the sociobiological, in the broader sense, basis of society and then the development of the rest of society. And a good economic system is one which enables each person to specialize in the field of endeavor where he or she can exploit his talent to the best of his ability and to make the best use of his innate, God-given capacities. Yeah. What if you have no talent? Vote for the socialist and wait for the welfare state to turn you into a dependent, parasitical, slavery plantation, as they call this, dependent, economic age. I don't know how they call this, but that's what they say in the context of modern America. Yeah. No, but seriously, every person has at least a talent, and the purpose of the division of labor is to enable each one to thrive in his or her own best field of expression. Of course, the people who have very low talent or whose talent cannot be economically rewarded, they have usually debilitating and stupid jobs. Their talents sometimes consist in just repeating the same mindless task over and over. It can be problematic. Yeah. Let us continue. Yeah. So then, in the continuity. The physiognomical personality determination of each individual, they are in the continuity of the sociobiological, demographic, anthropological, ethnic and sexual differences. Namely, usually, let's not talk in a too controversial manner about ethnicity and race, but usually women, they have certain specific talents which are more widely distributed among women than among men, and men as well. Men tend to be more creative in terms of artistic achievement, scientific production, management, etc., etc. And then there are various levels of achievements depending on the various ethnic groups. Historically, it's not set in stone, but looking at the historical perspective, here again, Mr. Charles Murray has published a book about human accomplishment. The overwhelming majority of great human accomplishment have come from anthropological European people. Any person of any ethnic group can achieve a great level of success in science, politics, art, philosophy, etc., etc. But yeah. Then evolutionary psychology, it's just psychology, but the modern development of science has shown that precisely the continuity of sociobiology, not only the body of man, but his mind as well, his psyche is determined by evolutionary consideration. I mean, it enables to shed light and to interpret the fact that the behavior of human can be interpreted not completely, but it can help through the lens of Darwinian evolution and selection, namely a lot of behaviors, why humans are afraid of being rejected, why there is competition for status, why Do males fight for females, for the possession of a female? Why humans are attracted by sugar? Why they are afraid of spiders and snakes, but not of tobacco or electricity or car accidents, etc. I thought a lot of questions like this. I mean, there are more interesting questions, but these are the kind of questions that are mentioned and explained by the recent development of evolutionary psychology. And here I will just make a brief remark. It's a little bit more complex, but each time there's a breakthrough in science, the modern world in which the new idea emerged can be interpreted differently, but also retrospectively, a new light is being shed on the entire historical process. And now, for instance, I'm sure that there are students in evolutionary psychology who interpret or reinterpret the history of Rome, for instance, in the Western tradition, of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, or classical Athens through the lens of evolutionary psychology. And indeed, the behaviors of all humans can be interpreted through one determination. The same goes with psychoanalysis. Once psychoanalysis has entered into the frame, one can project the categories of psychoanalysis on the behaviors of all or most important historical figures. Let's not talk about the psychoanalytical problems of the Germans of the past, the present, or the future. That's a joke. Yeah. Then psychiatry, psychoanalysis, precisely. Not all humans suffer from psychiatric problems, thank God, but a lot of them do, especially in the modern world. And here, these are just books, these are not necessarily references, but these are books that I possess in my library. Multiple Personalities. There are psychological, psychiatric, and psychoanalytical problems in a lot of humans, and solutions and a cure can be found on the channel Psych2Go. I will put the link. Psych2Go, very good channel, excellent content. It can help a lot. All the people who suffer from any kind of psychological problem, if you want to understand yourself and cure yourself eventually, watch this channel. It produces great content. Yeah. Now I will adjust. And here, just to illustrate, of course, people who have psychiatric problems, sometimes they are sent into asylum, that would be the prisons here, or they commit crimes, that would be here, or they join the Democratic Party. That's a joke. No, the Democrats say, no, they join the Republicans. A neutral observer would say, no, they join both sides. The healthy people, they stay away from politics. Here I'm not sure that it's a joke. Maybe it's serious to say that if you are healthy, stay out of politics. Yeah. Here, psychology. So there is partly a determination, an evolutionary determination. Here it's a modern category, namely it's recent, it's a few decades old. But psychology, basically, it includes introspection, and again, Psych2Go is a very good channel. Also, very simply, imagination, memory, emotions, tendencies. Here, a book by an author which produces a good book about the neurobiology of emotions, the importance of emotion to understand human behavior, the connection between the brain and the emotions, precisely. But every single human experiences precisely. Every single human experiences. The first is a verb, the second is a plural noun, and it stores within his or his own mind memories of all, not all, but some. Sometimes unconsciously. That's the psychoanalytical theory party, but the memories of one's own life are being stored, depending then on the level of intelligence, the importance of the memories, etc. But some of them are being consciously stored, some are unconsciously stored, and they re-emerge sometimes in dreams or in traumatic events, etc. But every singular human has a sense of identity because he can tell himself a story and connect his or her own memory. There's the imagination. It's the ability to connect sensuous experience and to create new forms of expression. For instance, the mixture between a horse and a rhino gives a unicorn, for instance. Just an illustration. That's probably not how it emerged, but that's just an illustration. A unicorn, a ghost, dragons, vampires, these are products of the imagination. And every human has a lot of imagination, or not so much, but they are variously determined. To imagine, they need to create mental images and representation, to associate sensuous representation, to create new ones. It's a faculty of the human psyche. Emotion is the faculty of being internally affected, moved, to be to react to external stimuli or to internal determinations, thoughts. One can create emotions through the use of language. Words can be great, or they can degrade, or even worse, they can teach hate. That's a Sing for the Moment by Eminem. Eminem is a great lyricist because he can arouse a lot of emotion through his mastery of the English language. Modern day Shakespeare. How do you call this? That's in a Renegade. A modern day, a modern day Shakespeare, I think. Yeah. So yeah, it can arouse emotion. And then tendencies. These are the spontaneous ways that a human behaves individually. It's partly tied to personality, to ethics and behavior. So there's a connection between ethics would be the consciously the tendencies which have become conscious and socialized. To behave ethically means to act according to principles which are socially either socially accepted or unaccepted, but at least which have become conscious of themselves. The tendencies, they are unconscious sometimes. And a code of morality or a code of ethics, it's, in a historical perspective, it's the crystallization, the stabilization of a long process of trials and error. Here that would be empirical view. When it's not revealed by God in the table of Moses or the Quran or the teachings of the Torah, etc., or the Buddhist or Hindu text, etc., but in an atheist perspective, beware the atheist. God is watching you. No, but seriously. Ethics, a code of morality, usually it's socialized, not in a sense of socialism, or unfortunately sometimes it is, like political correctness, etc. But ethics is usually the result of the spontaneous tendencies of man to restrain the negative tendencies. Do not steal, do not kill, do not have a lust for the wife of your neighbor, do not cheat, do not lie, do not bear false witness, etc., etc. What we find, the 10 Commandments. I do not know them by heart. Oh, you say I'm gonna have problems. Yeah, but basically, ethics, laws of ethics, they are ways to rationalize and socialize the tendencies, to promote the good tendencies and to try to restrain the negative tendencies. Yeah. Then language is a means for thinking entities, for thinking humans, to express their interiority, precisely their emotion, their imagination, their memories, their tendencies, to express, to exteriorize through articulate expression by producing sounds, by producing meaning and intelligibility for other humans. Semiotics is the theory of sign. To produce signs, artistic expression, I don't know how to call this, on the railway, not on the highway, the signs on a highway, the speed limit, etc. These are not semiotic signs, but these are signs which help communicate. The flag of every country is a sign. It's not a sign, it's a symbol, but the how do you call this? The button in an elevator, that's a sign. These are examples. That's a sign. It has a meaning. Yeah, so language here is really, in a broad sense, the way of communicating thoughts and emotions and to exteriorize one's own interiority. Linguistics and grammar are the study of language, and it is through language that humans can share thoughts. And then intelligence is the realm here of pure thought, the pure abstraction. That would be the categories of logic, the determinations of thought, and IQ is the quantitative determination of intelligence, namely to measure the intelligence of person, and every singular person speaks a language, with a few exceptions of people who are mute or who or those who speak several languages, or those who have articulation problems or cognitive problems, who cannot express themselves, or who are intellectually degenerate in a sense of they have a brain problem. But most humans, they can speak if they have been educated properly, if they haven't had traumas, brain traumas in their childhood, they can express themselves and they can communicate their thoughts with others. Like Eminem said, words, they can be great or they can degrade, or even worse, they can teach hate. Yeah. Yeah. So, and every singular human is determined in terms of the way he expresses himself through, it's partly biological in the sense of it's partly related to the intelligence, namely the brain of the person. People who are more intelligent, they can express themselves more fluently, more clearly. They have a broader range of vocabulary, more subtlety. They can connect words more skillfully. They can express themselves more fluently. They master a wider variety of words. They can express more subtle meanings. They live in a wealthier world in terms of representation because of the language that they speak. And those who speak several languages, usually they are more intelligent, not in terms of IQ, although it's partly related, but in terms of a broader intelligence. In order to understand another culture, to understand it really, when I say one has to be able to speak the language, at least partly. To study the great text produced by mankind in the native, original language is very important, because there are thoughts which cannot be adequately translated by losing their original language. Yeah. That's why when I read German metaphysics, I read German metaphysics in German. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the IQ of the population determines partly what are the books about controversial topics. They are everywhere around me. I'm not a controversial person. Well, here are books about the sociobiology of. Do we see? No, we don't. But we don't need it, because the people who have watched up until now, they have become smarter about men and women relationship. Here are an example. Yeah, it's kind of a cheap book. There are good ideas, but it's not a scholarly work, but it's a good book. Yeah. And here it's a more serious academic work on the evolution of desire and mating strategies, again by Mr. David Booth. So, just to illustrate, we live in an era where the mating strategies of humans are becoming consciously expressed and accessible to anyone who can spend $20. Oh, people are poor in the US because of the policies implemented by Mr. Who am I gonna blame? I'm gonna let the Republicans and the Democrats argue with one another about who's to blame. But yeah, basically, if the economy declines, people do no longer have the time, or if the educational system is broken, they do not have either the interest or the intelligence, intelligence is not only determined by the educational system, but it can awaken or put into a slumber the interest of people. But if people had $20 and a little bit of free time and the interest, they could read this book and they would understand a lot about male and female relationships all over the world, because it talks about societies from all over the world. It's universal. And then it's a way of undressing, not literally. That comes later. If the pieces of advice, I'm not sure that there are a lot of pieces of advice, but if the strategy is understood, yeah, that's the end goal, of course. Hey, what did you expect? No, but seriously. To undress scientifically the other gender, because in this book women are naked. There are no pictures of naked women, but they are scientifically being undressed by Mr. Booth, and men as well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, about IQ. A book like The Bell Curve explains very simply the relationship between IQ and, here I will switch the picture. Okay, it's been 1 hour, I would say 1 hour and 30 maximum, so if I will not speak about everything, but yeah. So now I have listed, I have showed broadly what I call subjective Geist, namely the fundamental demographic in the broadest sense, determinations of the population on a collective and individual level, and the transition from the realm of language and intelligence and thought to the realm of objective Geist, namely the realm of institution, is precisely because people, when they can communicate with one another, they can form institutions which are impersonal modes of organizing collective life. And the fundamental institution of most modern societies in the broadest perspective, especially Western societies, is the family unit. So here it's partly natural and partly not, precisely because in the realm of nature, not all mammals and not all human societies have a traditional family of one man, one woman. It's partly cultural. There are, how do you call this, polygamous and polyandrous societies where one man, several women. That's the best deal. One woman and several men. Well, yeah, but or the tribal organization or an extended family, a nuclear family, broken household, etc., etc. But yeah, the family is the basic unit of most modern Western or Westernized society. It's not universal. Historically, anthropologically, it's not universal. It's the predominant feature. So family are organized around marriage. Here it's precisely in the Western, predominantly Christian perspective, but also the Jews and the Muslims, but it's predominantly a Western Christian tradition, the Christian marriage, one might say, which is responsible for the education of children. Here it's upbringing. Education here is more upbringing, and the educational system, it's more instruction. So it's education in the sense of upbringing, education in the sense of instruction. Yeah. And the man and women relationship, which make families thrive or decline depending on the dynamics of the intergender, intersexual relationships. Yeah. So, yeah, about the books about IQ. The Bell Curve, in order to understand a book like The Bell Curve, but actually to understand the development of society, The Bell Curve is a book which takes the determination of IQ, which is the product of scientific studies, and applies this to enlighten a lot of phenomena, economic phenomena, sociological, namely the average income, the social status, the level of education, the health expectancy, not the health expectancy, but the how do you call this? The ability to remain healthy, to live longer. That's what I mean by expectancy. It's life expectancy is partly tied to health. Yeah. So the impact of IQ upon economic income, sociological status, health. It doesn't talk a lot, but on the cultural aspect, I mean, people, their cultural behavior, which is partly tied to ethics and partly tied to entertainment. People have different levels and types of entertainment depending on their level of IQ and their level of sociological status. It's partly interconnected, partly distinct. Namely, there are people with a high social status and a relatively low IQ in comparison with their social group. For instance, a football player who has, not all of them, but who has a low IQ, he can be very rich. He will belong to the class of the rich, but he will not belong to the class of the intelligent rich. And there are intelligent people, poets or failed artists or philosophers who are very intelligent, but they are poor, either because they are not interested in money or because they have psychological problems. Yeah, so it's overwhelmingly correlated, intelligence and status, but not rigorously. There are a lot of exceptions. Yeah, but yeah, IQ determines economics, health, education, achievements, sociological status, culture, relationship to rights, partly political views and political tendencies. Usually the very smart people in white society, they are on the left. The low IQ people, they are on the left as well, but there are smart people on the right and low IQ people on the right as well. But usually the very intelligent, they are leftists, because very intelligent people, they have a tendency to be more open-minded, to be more open to new experiences, to have a more universalist ethics, etc., etc. So that's why they are very good-hearted white leftists who are leftists because they are very intelligent, but they are kind of naive, and yeah, it brings about negative consequences. That's one of the problems of the liberals. They want to do good, but usually it produces negative consequences. And the less intelligent white people, usually they are more on the right in the modern context, but also the workers traditionally they are on the left. So I will not make a sociological analysis, but yeah, the illustration in the modern world is the arrogant white liberals. Usually they have a very high IQ, very high social status, etc., and leftist political views. And they are in league with the less privileged intellectually, which are people who suffer from crime, welfare addiction, unemployment, etc., etc. That's one of the conclusion that the bell curve arrives at. Yeah. And then that's another illustration. The discovery of the determination of IQ enables not only to understand modern societies better, but also to retrospectively project onto the past new data and a new interpretation of the data, and to realize that a lot of successful societies, one of the reasons why they have been successful was the high intelligence of the population. Yeah. A book like this comes in the continuity of the bell curve. That's a work by Richard Lynn, who explains basically through a lot of empirical data that there is a correlation between economic success and the intelligence, the quantitative intelligence of the population. So we live in an age where this kind of knowledge is being made available in the scientific circles, but eventually it has to become popular. Namely, people have to understand that the various levels of economic prosperity between the various countries and the various continents of the world, they are partly determined by IQ. Otherwise, the economic, political, social, and historical life of the world is unintelligible. Yeah. And again, in the continuity, these are the kind of good books. Here's a German sociologist, published by Cambridge University Press. That's continental Europe, slightly, slowly getting out of its dogmatic slumber, one might say. A German published by a British publishing house, which uses the discovery of Anglo-Saxon and American science to produce a good book, which explains that the correlation, again, between IQ, I simplified, but the correlation between IQ and a lot of social outcomes in the realm of economics and sociology, which makes predictions about the wealth and then the evolution of the GDP and the wealth and the evolution of IQ of all societies eventually. So that's a good work. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. These are the books about what I call subjective or Geist, subjective spirit, which I wanted to briefly introduce. But now I will comment for, I said it will be 1 hour and 30 maximum. So for the next 20 minutes, maybe I will talk about the view of the totality. Here again, I improvise, but it's just to show the utility, the usefulness of this document. So yeah, the fundamental building block of most modern society is the family with this determination, and when the relationship of marriage are being screwed up, it becomes difficult. Here I will make a little bit of pop music. A song about marriage that I've been thinking about, of course, is Come On Let Me Ride by Skylar Grey and Eminem. Come on, let me ride your bicycle, it's so fantastical on your bicycle. I thought many months ago that the kind of song that ought to be sung in churches before a marriage. This is what women secretly think. What do you want? Marry the guy. because he's romantic, because he speaks well, he's handsome. No, actually, you just want to ride his bicycle. Yeah, I confess. That's what women would say. That's what they think, because this is the reason why art, and here music, pop music is a form of art, expresses the truth about society. Yeah, there is the charming prince, that's the official image, when there are still a romantic view of marriage, and then it's still a romantic. The song by Skylar is partly romanticism. But that's why we live in an age of revelation, because the mind of men and women is being revealed by the information being shared on the internet. Yeah. So yeah, the building block of a society is the traditional family, marriage, etc. And then these groups of human, these families, they organize to produce wealth. What is economics? The relationship between the desires and the needs of individuals and the scarcity of resources, how to satisfy the needs in terms of food, water, shelter, hygiene, and then self-realization in various ways, comfort and psychological well-being. The resources are scarce. How do humans organize to produce as much resources as possible, or to produce the best resources possible? What is the best mode of organizing cooperation between workers to produce the greatest amount of economic goods, or the best economic good, depending on the purpose? It can be purely quantitative increase, that would be the seeking growth with no consideration for the well-being of the workers, of the environment, etc., or simply seeking the most fair distribution of wealth, etc. So that's economic organization. This is the kind of debate that most Western society talk about, and most society talk about daily. It revolves around economics, but if just the economic aspect is taken into account by leaving aside all the other determinations, it doesn't happen like this. But usually economics is talked about being tied to politics and finance, sometimes the educational system and geopolitics, but all the other aspects, culture, sometimes they are left aside. The sociobiological aspect, the consideration of IQ, the consideration of ethics, it comes back into the arena, one might say, not because old moralistic religious view, but simply ecology is a way of reintroducing morality within economics, namely the modern ecological people. They want to restrict economic development for the sake of ethical values, limit the pollution, lower down the carbon footprint, etc., etc. So that would be the connection between ethics, economics, and nature, which is the spatio-temporal world, but also the realm of biology and organic life. Yeah. So human groups, they organized economically to produce resources. In order to produce economic goods, they have to be financed. The businesses, the projects, they have to be financed. I mean, there has to be an injection of money or resources to stimulate the creation of more resources. The financial system, which starts with banking and money, in order to start a business, one needs funds. It can be in the form of loans, how do you call this, public participation, how do you call this, crowdfunding, money distributed by the state for specific entrepreneurs, etc., etc. But yeah, here economics, it could be divided into infinite number of branches, but yeah, economic and finance, they are usually at the center of most society, because this is how people earn their daily bread. Yeah. Or their daily amount of fat and sugar and soft drinks, etc., which makes them unhealthy, and then the socialized health system, people have to pay to cure the problems caused by an excess of economic, not an excess of economic growth, but a non-necessarily relevant production of economic goods, which can have a negative impact, either because the mode of production is very demanding in the division of labor, it can create health problems, or because the goods which are being produced, here in the case of food, they are unhealthy, which brings about diseases, heart problems, overweight, etc., then it has to be cured. And then the demagogues, they will say, oh, let us implement the socialist policy, but it may make things even worse, etc., etc. So yeah, that's just an illustration of the interconnectedness. The sociology, division of labor, modes of production, of course, it's connected to economics. So here it's not really... maybe I will change this if I have the opportunity, but yeah, division of labor, modes of production, these are more economic categories. Sociology, it's partly tied with economics, it's the social role that each agent occupies within a society. What is the function? What is the status? Who is the most respected, the most honored? What kind of values or roles are promoted in modern society? This is economic production. And diplomas, degrees in modern society. In all the traditional societies, in Roman society, these were civic virtues or aristocratic virtues, the ability to have clients, not in the sense of customers, but in the sense of dependent people, to enhance the prestige of the aristocratic lines, and also the ability to rule over men in warfare, to be a good citizen, etc. In hunter-gatherer society, this is the ability to hunt big game, as they call this. In Middle Age Europe, this was the knight ideal, namely honor, loyalty to the Lord, not Lord Jesus, but to the Lord, to the how do you call this? Those who dominated over the land, yeah, the landlords, yeah, loyalty, piety, etc., etc. But in the modern world, what is valued sociologically is the ability to produce economic wealth, namely high intelligence, status, diploma, etc., etc. In Arabic tribes of the Islamic era, the beginning of Islam, these were the ability to be a warrior or a thief, not in a negative sense, but the ability to acquire resources through various means. This is what some Arabic tribes have done and still do, in a way. Not all of them, of course, but this is part of the Mongolian tribes, Genghis Khan, etc., the hordes coming from Asia. It was partly the sociological status, depending partly on warfare and theft. In a sense, it has existed. Yeah, in aristocratic Europe, it was the ability to defend the blood and the honor of one's own bloodline in fights, to defend the peasants, and maybe here it's a romanticized view, but to defend the peasants and the workers surrounding a town or a village with a castle, etc. These were warlike qualities which are being celebrated. But then warfare in the Middle Ages, or in even up until the modern era, until the Industrial Revolution, and the development of gunpowder, etc., they were people fought with swords and axes, not with missiles and tanks. So yeah, when the technology changes, the value change as well. That's an illustration of the connection between technology, economic development, and the values which are being celebrated. Yeah, but being an anti-speciesist vegan. In the context of Paleolithic, or in the context of hunter-gatherers of the Ice Age in Europe, I'm not sure that it would have had a lot of sociological success. Here comes a polar bear. No, don't worry, let's promote anti-speciesism. We are all the same, mosquitoes, polar bears. Yeah. It doesn't work in all contexts. Here, a little bit of old-fashioned Marxism can be useful to understand the sociology of a lot of people in the modern world. So yeah, that's just an illustration. Then, culture, customs, it's partly tied with ethics. Ethics, I've already said, is partly tied with the upbringing, the educational values shared and pervaded by the educational system, the media. Yeah, but also it brings about customs. Customs, it's very difficult to define. It's the way people interact spontaneously in a given society which has had the time to develop a common cultural code, one might say. But what is culture? It's the mixture of economic habits, sociological distinction, upbringing, and marriage, ethics, language, religious, artistic, and philosophical views unconsciously or consciously shared in common, ways of behaving, ways of interacting with the other, a culture. It can be defined as just the sum of all artistic production. That would be high culture, but culture in the sense of custom, it's very difficult to define because the view of legislation and property rights, the political culture, it's the way people relate to the political organization of society. Civic virtue is part of customs and culture. There are countries in which the people have a culture of civic virtue, and some where it's not the case. So culture is very difficult to define, but using all the categories, or most of them, can help clarify. Yeah, then sport and entertainment, it already existed in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, in the Middle Ages, etc. People need to be entertained. It can be bread and circuses, or tititainment, or pornography, video games, etc. There are various levels of entertainment, but it's partly tied with economics, with psychology, because humans, they cannot argue with one another all the time. Sometimes they have to be friendly with one another, so that's why there's entertainment. Yeah, that's an illustration. Then, rights, legislation, I will not comment systematically, but basically, yeah, I will simplify now. Rights is the institutionalization of ethics, namely morality. Here, ethics and morality, I use them interchangeably, it's not always the case, but morality is the relation to self, a personal relation to self, and a personal relation to others. Rights, it's how to behave, how to act on a personal level, not for the good of others, because a morality which promotes doing good to others, it's not always very efficient. Not doing evil or not doing wrong to others, that's the first step. That's negative morality in a good sense, not harming others. Pleasing others or doing good to others, that's generosity, saintliness. Try not to hurt them, that's the first moment. Yeah, so morality is relation to self in sense of moral consciousness, or relation to other in a personal relationship, or relation to God. For the Muslims, the Protestants, the Jews, mostly the Protestants who have they are supposed to have a personal relationship with God. Yeah. Whereas rights would be the exteriorization of morality, but it's more loosely connected in the sense that rights, they have to be more, usually they are founded upon ethical principles. They are not completely autonomous, but they are more abstract in the sense that they are less demanding, or sometimes they are more demanding, but they are less demanding in the sense that if you fail to uphold your ethical or moral standard, you will only be in relation to yourself and your own guilt, or relation to God. If you fail to obey the law, you will have problems with the judicial system. Sometimes they are in conflict with one another. Ideally, in a healthy society, rights and legislation ought to be in the continuity of morality, but they cannot completely coincide, because rights means interaction of people in an impersonal way. In order to be moral, it has to begin with immediate morality. Here it could be to be a decent person in day-to-day interaction, but through rights, people are connected on a national or international scale in case of human rights, and it's more impersonal. One can respect rights and law without being in connection with others directly. Yeah, so it's more impersonal, it's more objective. Morality is more subjective. That's one of the easiest distinction, but yeah. Then crime is a violation of rights or law. Property rights, here it's really the modern bourgeois Anglo-Saxon view, but actually it can be universal. Then each singular individual is considered as a free agent if he has the cognitive faculty and the maturity to be the owner of himself and the owner of his property, which he can exchange with others, not by being stolen his property, but by willingly exchanging with others. That's the theory of contracts, etc. The natural rights is the idea that all humans ought to have God-given rights, which ought to be respected, etc., etc. But then it's really the moment of universality, and not all people as thinking agents, they can have rights, very basic rights, but then it has to be particularized. I mean, there are various ethnic groups, various genders, various population depending on age. A 14 years old cannot have the same rights as a 30 years old. A man and a woman, they can have the same rights on some level, but not on all level, because they are distinct. So there is the level of universality, but then there are the various particularities. Yeah, and the purely abstract set of legislation, if it's too abstract, it cannot be applied, because the people, they are not pure abstractions. They have specificities, which means particularities. Yeah, here are the various institutions which have to make the peaceful interaction between the various members or the various groups of society as harmonious as possible, the relationship as peaceful and as harmonious as possible. Politics is, and the separation of power and government is who consciously decides how to set and to shape legislation and law, and to intervene in case where there are conflicts within a society. Who decides the politics, namely the path that a society ought to take economically, demographically, culturally, etc., etc. Who has the ability to tax, to emit, to not to create, but to validate money, etc. So the fundamental decision: who is responsible for defending the territory, who is responsible for promoting what people based on what determination, etc., etc. That's how to shape the behavior of others, officially to be recognized legally. There is economic power, the ability to influence others through wealth. There is sociological power, the ability to influence others through one's own status, by influencing directly or indirectly others, by acting, not necessarily virtuously, that would be ethical, but by exerting indirect or sometimes unconscious influence, because people with a high sociological status, others want to imitate them consciously or unconsciously. This explains the behavior of a lot of leftists, young leftists. They are easily impressed by their professors, because their professors, they talk about morality, anti-racism, reaction against the patriarchy, etc. And the young leftists, they are easily impressed because the professor has a high sociological status, or the journalist, or the leftist politician, and the young, they want to imitate them because unconsciously it enables them to gain status, prestige, eventually resources and access to females or to prestige, etc. That's the modern case of the Western world. Yeah, but there's economic power, sociological power, spiritual power, and then political power. He who controls politics controls more or less other determination. Back in the modern world, it is not politics which control economics, it's finance and banking which controls the politicians, usually because money is that which enables to direct the production of wealth, but the direction of a society. That's why the politicians, they are considered to be puppets in democratic society, because those who pull the strings, these are those who have the knowledge or the resources to shape through the media. Predominantly, that's a very important power. There's the power of the media to shape public image. Those who control the media, they can shape the worldview of the people, and offer a distorted or a falsified or a limited or an accurate sometimes view of a society, its past, its future, its values, etc., etc. And yeah. Okay. We see the full picture. Yeah, I will just comment briefly the remaining aspect. So yeah, that's for the media. With the social media, people are allowed to express dissenting views from the official narrative promoted by the government, the politician, the educational system, the media. A new perspective can emerge. This is connected with what I showed at the very beginning of the video, the phenomenology of spirit, namely through a technological innovation, a change of consciousness, a shift of consciousness occurs, and the entire structure is being shaken and will be shaken because people acquire new knowledge, and knowledge has an impact upon behavior, and behavior has an impact upon the whole social life, and the more people acquire new knowledge, the more they transform their own behavior on an individual and then collective level. That's the interaction between intellect and will. theoretical aspect, namely incorporating the understanding of the world, and the practical aspect, exteriorizing one's own inner determination. Which makes me think that I will have to promote my ethical documents. Yeah. Then, diplomacy, military, history, that's just the exteriorization of politics in relation to other states. The lobbies, non-governmental organization, globalism and geopolitics. Geopolitics belongs with diplomacy and military, but they are partly tied, the lobbies, the NGOs, and the globalist institutions. They are partly connected with the banking institution, the secret services, and the various governments, but these are secret groups. They are not always secret. They operate in broad daylight, but these are groups of influence, which either they are very wealthy or very prestigious sociologically, or they promote ethical behavior, human rights, ecological care for the planet, saving the children, the UNICEF or the UNESCO, etc., promoting egalitarian policies, etc. They use the trick of morality, for good or for bad, in order to promote universal goals, and it has an influence upon the reputation of each country. So the leaders of the government, they have to obey certain ethical code to respect the globalist agenda, etc., because there is a global community and everyone has a reputation. So what happens on a sociological level, on an individual level, the competition for status and respectability and virtue signaling, it happens on a global scale. There are the good guys and the villains on a global scale. Those who break the rules, they have to be punished. It's the repercussion on a global scale with the development of the technology of communication of what happened already in a Darwinian perspective tens of thousands of years ago, namely the sociobiology of inclusion-exclusion. You have to adopt the values of the group in order to be accepted. If you break the rules of the group, you are excluded. That's what happens with the global villains. Yeah. Transport and energy, that's a byproduct of economics. This is the infrastructure of a society, namely in order for all these interactions to occur, the transfer of wealth, money, goods and services, the movement of people, the transfer of communication, etc. There has to be a substratum, namely a basic material foundation, namely the transport, modes of transportation like cars, roads, railways, trains, airplanes, boats, etc. And energy, oil, gas, electricity, the production, the consumption, the circulation of energy is what enables the movement. That's a physical determination in the sense that these are physical categories and chemical properties. Oil is a chemical product, electricity is a physical transfer of information, when I say, through the electromagnetic signals, but the production and the circulation of energy, or the acquisition of resources, oil, gas, the production of electricity, wood, coal, the biomass, how do you call this? Yeah, these are examples. Renewable energies, etc., etc. That's tied to economics, tied to ethics in the modern world, to think about the sustainability of an economic system, etc., etc. And technology is also tied with the development of economics, and it enables the circulation of information, goods and services, economic growth, etc., etc. But it also has a tremendous impact upon the consciousness through the rise of the development of information on the social media, but also it brings about a change of responsibility in ethics, because people, for instance, with the big data, it brings about anxiety in people. Oh, we are being watched. There is mass surveillance, etc., etc. These are examples. Or it enables people through the internet to have access to the totality of world knowledge. Yeah, that's an illustration. And then art, religion, and philosophy. I already said this. This is the conscious or unconscious expression of a life of a given society, or it's an individual who expresses his own artistic, religious, or philosophical views, but it's also the expression of an entire society. I represent an entire generation. Nicki Minaj, Fly. Yeah. Very good music. Yeah, and philosophy is the conceptual grasping of the totality. And yeah, so art in a modern world, pop culture, mostly in music, but also video games, movies, they can enlighten, they can shed light upon the totality, because the artists, they feel themselves, they feel to express themselves freely, without the moral constraints of day-to-day sociological interactions. For instance, Slim Shady, for Eminem, that's a way of exteriorizing an aspect of negativity that cannot be expressed in day-to-day interaction, otherwise you would end up in jail. So that's a way of transcending some of the negativity inherent in social and human interaction by transcending this through an artistic expression, that's illustration, or the movie Idiocracy. I've just watched a trailer recently. Idiocracy is a way of expressing some of the demographic problems, the multiplication of sometimes people who are not very intelligent. That's a way of expressing this, or the mass surveillance, 1984 by George Orwell, etc., etc. That these are just illustrations. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I could say. I improvise, but simply, I think that this document is very useful, because here I talked very broadly, but simply, the usefulness, the useful aspect of this document is, for instance, when any singular event or news is extracted from any newspaper or a news website, in order to make this event intelligible, it has to be recontextualized within the social context of the society from which it is extracted. And if it's a global information, for instance, climate change, it can be particularized in the sense that there are societies who produce more carbon footprints than others, but this is more of a global phenomenon. But the unemployment or the strike in the health system in England, it has to be recontextualized. The demography, the psychology, the education, the sociology, the culture, the rights and legislation, the government policies, the technology, the behavior, it has to be recontextualized in order to make this information intelligible. Yeah. So now I will promote my ethical documents. Yeah. I will not comment, because I will not do this daily, but I will briefly show the documents. This is my personal standards of behavior that I have adopted over the past many weeks or many months. I will not explain why, I just show. It just enables to limit the consumption, to reduce the various addictions, to have a better, healthier lifestyle, less pollution, less plastic, less consumption, less waste of money, less waste of time, etc., etc. Here it's a little bit more demanding, but that's just my own standards. I don't need these objects, no longer. If everyone acted like this, you would have a sugar and industrial food. It's a more traditionalist lifestyle. It's really a simplification of the lifestyle, but if more people acted like this, the standards of living would drop significantly, but also the working hours, the pollution, the addiction to the modern comfort in the negative sense. Yeah, that's part of the rise of a global ecological ethical standards. I have applied this consistently for the past few months. And here it's a little bit radical. I have disobeyed this law today, for instance. Or actually, no. Partly. But just I eat mostly raw fruits and raw vegetables. But I have consistently applied these. What we don't see is I pick up the trash in the street when I walk outside. I failed to do this today, but otherwise I've done this consistently. I've made my donation to Wikipedia and the Ron Paul Institute. So I have almost consistently and constantly followed these principles for a very long period of time, for many weeks, many months. Yeah, and if a lot of people acted like this, the economy would would be downgraded, but the pollution as well, the alienation of the modern labor as well. People would lead simpler lifestyles, but they would have more autonomy, more freedom, more free time, more leisure, a freer mind, less garbage, less pollution, intellectual and physical pollution. They would lead healthier lifestyles, and yeah, that's what I do. I am at peace with my decision. Yeah. So now I will take a cold shower and upload the video. I don't know when the video will be published, but I make when I have the opportunity, I will make short lectures as long as I can. I'm in a stable mood. It's kind of boring. Sometimes I can be more vigorous in terms of entertainment. Here I know it has been pretty boring, I guess. But as long as I publish video, I will make all sorts of videos. Some are planned, some are more spontaneous, some will be boring, some will be kind of embarrassing. Some maybe will be great. Who knows? Yeah. And yeah. Also a piece of advice that I give. I didn't plan giving this piece of advice, but I have been addicted to reading books over most of my adult life. But now I've decided to read less books quantitatively, but to read not better books, because I've already read great books, but to read the books better. I've been reading this book. This book is more accessible. It's really kind of an easy read. But to read one book once, but to read it well, is more rewarding intellectually than reading 5 books on the same topic, but reading them superficially, which maybe I've had the tendency. So this book, I've annotated the book. I will reread my own annotations. I will meditate a little bit about the book, because I already know the broad information. But to read one book, to read it well, if it's just one book, it can become a trap in a sense of ideological imprisonment. But for the people who have the leisure or the opportunity to read fewer books, but to read them better in terms of investing more time, more dedication, more reflection, can be a good idea. That's a kind of a piece of advice that I can give now, but I have spent most of my life reading an enormous quantitative amount of books without reading them well. Not all of them. But this piece of advice comes from this book. That's a great book. How to read a book. Very intelligent, these Americans. That's an old-fashioned American, but they were intelligent back then. They are still intelligent now. Yeah. So that's what I could say. And also, yeah, no, I will not. No, I will end the video here. That's part of my contribution to the establishment of a real educational system. Free, not compulsory. You're not forced to watch my videos, but it's free. I do not ask, as of now, if you're good at something, never do it for free. But as of now, I produce my content freely. And I really offer the broadest structure, just the map. And I promote the good books, not all of them, but most of the books that I promote are good. And most of the good books which have been promoted, most of the good books which have been published, I promote them. I mean, not all of them, because there are thousands of books, but yeah, the books that I promote, usually they are good. Yeah. That was my daily contribution to making humans intelligent again. I don't know, or making them intelligent for the first time. I don't know. Yeah. I will stop there for now. I will take a cold shower, sleep, and then go back to work.